Most people would never look at a bottle of laundry detergent and think millionaire. But that's exactly why businesses like this keep surprising people. While everyone is chasing the next hot app, the next AI startup, or the next social media trend, entrepreneurs like Ethan Carter are quietly selling a product that millions of Americans use every single week. And in Ethan's case, that simple product helped build a business generating more than $2 million a year in revenue. On the surface, it sounds almost too simple. Laundry detergent isn't exciting. It isn't glamorous. It doesn't get headlines. Yet every household needs it, every apartment complex needs it, every hotel needs it, and every cleaning company depends on it. That raises a fascinating question. If demand is everywhere, why aren't more people building detergent brands? And more importantly, is this actually a smart business opportunity in 2025, or does it only look good from the outside? Because once we started digging into Ethan's operation, we found a very different story than what most people expect. Yes, there are attractive profit margins. Yes, there are customers who buy again and again. And yes, there are entrepreneurs building serious wealth in this industry. But there are also hidden costs, fierce competition, inventory challenges, and one major obstacle that almost every beginner completely underestimates. Today, we're putting the laundry detergent business to the test. We're breaking down the numbers, the startup costs, the production process, the customer acquisition strategy, and the real profitability behind the business. By the end of this video, you'll know whether a laundry detergent business is actually worth starting in 2025. But before we get into the money, we first need to understand why Ethan chose one of the most ordinary products in America and turned it into a multi-million-dollar opportunity. The surprising thing is that Ethan never planned to enter this industry at all. Before launching Carter Clean Labs, he spent years working in consumer goods distribution, watching products move through warehouses, retail stores, and online marketplaces across the country. During that time, he noticed something unusual. Trend-driven products would explode in popularity and then disappear just as quickly. One year it was fitness gadgets. The next year it was phone accessories. Then it was novelty household products. But one category seemed almost immune to those cycles. Cleaning products. No matter what was happening in the economy, people still washed their clothes. Families still bought detergent. Hotels still needed supplies. Commercial cleaning companies still reordered inventory. Demand never completely disappeared. That observation became even more important when Ethan started researching purchasing behavior. The average customer might buy a new electronic device every few years, but they buy detergent dozens of times throughout their lifetime. Instead of chasing a customer once, you could potentially serve the same customer again and again. To Ethan, that looked less like a product business and more like a subscription business hidden inside an everyday household item. The more research he conducted, the more interesting the numbers became. Americans do billions of loads of laundry every year. Large brands dominate store shelves, but consumers are constantly searching for alternatives that offer better scents, specialized formulas, eco-friendly ingredients, or local brands they can trust. That created opportunities that many entrepreneurs never noticed because they were focused on industries that seemed more exciting. But Ethan also discovered something that changed his entire approach. Success was not about inventing a revolutionary detergent formula. Most customers could not explain the chemistry inside the bottle they purchased every month. What they remembered was the smell, the packaging, the cleaning results, and whether the product fit their lifestyle. In other words, branding often mattered just as much as the formula itself. That realization convinced Ethan that this was not really a manufacturing business. It was a customer trust business. And if he could build a brand people remembered every time they did laundry, he believed there was room to compete. The opportunity seemed real. The demand was already there. The only question left was whether he could actually build the business from scratch and how much money it would take to get started. At this point, the opportunity looked promising on paper, but Ethan knew that every business looks good before the first dollar is spent. The real test was figuring out whether someone starting from zero could realistically build this operation. So he approached the problem like an experiment. If an average entrepreneur had $20,000 available, could they create a product, launch a brand, attract customers, and generate enough sales to survive? The first surprise was that manufacturing was not the largest expense. Product development, packaging design, labeling requirements, insurance, and inventory quickly consumed far more capital than most people expected. Ethan spent months researching suppliers, comparing ingredient costs, and testing different formulations before settling on a product he felt confident selling. Then came packaging. Custom bottles, professionally designed labels, shipping cartons, and brand assets all added up. Before a single customer ever placed an order, thousands of dollars had already been invested. The initial budget eventually landed between $15,000 and $25,000. Roughly $4,000 went into inventory and raw materials. Another several thousand covered packaging, branding, compliance requirements, and operational expenses. The remaining capital was reserved for marketing because Ethan understood one critical reality. A warehouse full of detergent means nothing if nobody knows the brand exists. That is where most beginners run into trouble. They focus entirely on creating the product while underestimating customer acquisition. Ethan believed the opposite. The formula had to be good, but the brand had to be discoverable. Every dollar spent needed to move the business closer to its first paying customer. Looking back, he says the startup phase was less about chemistry and more about risk management. Every decision carried financial consequences. Order too much inventory and cash gets trapped on shelves. Order too little and growth stalls. Spend too much on advertising and profits disappear. Spend too little and nobody finds the product. For months, the entire business felt like a balancing act between growth and survival. But eventually the first inventory run was complete, the bottles were ready, the branding was finished, and the product was officially available for sale. Now came the moment that would determine whether all that preparation actually mattered. Would customers buy it? The first orders gave Ethan proof that customers were willing to try the product, but they also revealed something far more important. Running this business was nothing like the simple picture most people imagine. Every bottle represented a long chain of operations happening behind the scenes. On a typical production day, the process starts long before any detergent enters a bottle. Raw ingredients arrive from suppliers and must be inspected, stored, and tracked. Fragrance components, cleaning agents, stabilizers, packaging materials, labels, and shipping supplies all need to be available at the right time. If even one component is delayed, production slows down. Once everything is prepared, batches are mixed according to strict specifications. Consistency matters because customers expect the same experience every time they purchase. A product that smells different or performs differently can damage trust almost immediately. After mixing, samples are checked for quality before moving to the filling stage. Bottles are filled, sealed, labeled, packed into cartons, and prepared for shipment. At first, Ethan handled much of this process himself. He was managing production schedules, checking inventory levels, coordinating shipments, responding to customers, and solving problems that appeared daily. What surprised him most was how little time was actually spent making detergent. The majority of his work involved logistics, planning, and customer service. As sales increased, another challenge emerged. Forecasting demand. If a social media campaign performed well, inventory could disappear faster than expected. If sales slowed, cash became tied up in unsold stock. Managing that balance became one of the most important skills in the business. By this stage, Ethan had learned a lesson that many entrepreneurs discover too late. Manufacturing a product is only one piece of the puzzle. The real challenge is building a system that can repeatedly produce, package, ship, and replenish inventory without creating bottlenecks. Every successful order created another responsibility. Customers who liked the product would eventually need another bottle. That repeat demand was the opportunity Ethan had been chasing from the beginning. But repeat customers only happen when the experience exceeds expectations. And that raised the next critical question. What exactly convinced people to buy from an unknown brand when massive companies already dominated the market? As sales continued to grow, Ethan finally reached the point where he could see the real numbers behind the business. And this is where things became far more interesting than most people expected. Many people assume that household products generate tiny profits because they compete against massive corporations. In reality, the economics depend entirely on how efficiently the operation is managed. For one of Ethan's most popular products, the total production cost including ingredients, packaging, labeling, and fulfillment averaged roughly $2.75 per bottle. The retail selling price ranged between $8 and $12 depending on the product line and sales channel. On paper, those margins looked incredible. But the story did not end there. Marketing expenses, payment processing fees, shipping costs, customer acquisition, returns, and overhead all took their share. By the time everything was accounted for, the net profit margin often landed between 18 and 25%. That is still a healthy business, but it is very different from the huge numbers many beginners imagine when they first see product markups. Ethan also discovered another important advantage. Unlike many consumer products that are purchased once, detergent creates recurring demand. A satisfied customer eventually runs out and needs another bottle. That repeat purchasing behavior dramatically improves profitability because acquiring an existing customer is usually much cheaper than acquiring a new one. Over time, returning customers became one of the most valuable assets in the entire company. Some customers placed orders every few months for years. Others signed up for recurring deliveries. Commercial clients often purchased larger quantities on predictable schedules. Those repeat transactions created stability and made forecasting easier. However, the numbers also exposed a major weakness. The business could not rely entirely on loyal customers. Growth required a constant flow of new buyers entering the system. Every month, new competitors appeared with attractive packaging, aggressive advertising, and lower prices. The market was large, but it was also crowded. That forced Ethan to ask a critical question. If customers already had countless options available, what exactly convinced them to choose his brand instead of the established names that had dominated store shelves for decades? The answer turned out to be surprisingly simple. Customers rarely compared ingredient lists. They rarely studied manufacturing processes. And they almost never cared about the technical details that entrepreneurs spent months obsessing over. What they cared about was trust. When Ethan began interviewing customers, the same themes appeared again and again. People wanted clothes that smelled fresh. They wanted products that worked consistently. They wanted packaging that looked professional. And they wanted confidence that they were spending their money on something reliable. That insight completely changed how Ethan viewed the business. He realized he was not competing against giant corporations on manufacturing scale. He was competing for a small piece of customer attention. If someone noticed the brand, tried the product, enjoyed the experience, and remembered it the next time they needed detergent, the company had a chance to win. To make that happen, Ethan focused heavily on branding. Every detail was intentional. The bottle design, the label colors, the fragrance names, the website experience, and even the shipping boxes were designed to create a consistent impression. Customers needed to feel like they were purchasing from a company they could trust rather than an anonymous product on a crowded shelf. Reviews became another powerful advantage. New buyers often looked at customer feedback before placing their first order. Positive reviews reduced uncertainty and increased conversion rates. Over time, word of mouth became one of the strongest growth drivers in the business. Existing customers recommended the products to friends and family, creating a steady stream of new buyers without requiring additional advertising expenses. But there was one challenge Ethan could never fully escape. Price competition. Large manufacturers could produce enormous volumes and often sell at lower prices. Trying to beat them on cost alone was a losing strategy. Instead, Ethan focused on differentiation. Unique scents, premium branding, specialized formulas, and exceptional customer service helped create value beyond price. The strategy worked, but it also revealed an important reality. Success was not determined by making a better detergent. Success was determined by building a stronger brand. And once Ethan understood that, the next challenge became obvious. If branding was the engine driving growth, how could he scale the company from thousands of customers to tens of thousands without losing the qualities that made people trust the business in the first place? By this stage, Carter Clean Labs had proven that customers would buy, reorder, and recommend the product. The challenge was no longer survival. The challenge was scale. Growing from a few hundred customers to a few thousand is difficult. Growing from a few thousand to tens of thousands requires an entirely different system. Ethan quickly realized that the biggest limitation was no longer production. It was distribution. Early on, most sales came directly through the company website. That worked well because it provided strong margins and direct access to customer feedback. But relying on a single sales channel created risk. If website traffic slowed down, revenue slowed down. To solve that problem, Ethan expanded into multiple channels. Online marketplaces introduced the brand to new customers. Subscription programs increased repeat purchases. Wholesale partnerships opened the door to retail locations and commercial accounts. Each channel served a different purpose, but together they created a more stable business. One of the most valuable discoveries came from business customers. Small hotels, vacation rentals, laundromats, and cleaning companies purchased larger quantities than typical households. A single commercial account could generate the same revenue as dozens of individual consumers. Those relationships became an important growth engine because they provided predictable recurring orders. As revenue increased, the company invested heavily in systems. Inventory tracking improved. Production scheduling became more efficient. Customer service processes were standardized. Marketing campaigns became data-driven instead of relying on guesswork. Every improvement removed friction from the operation. Ethan often says that scaling was less about working harder and more about eliminating bottlenecks. The goal was to create a company that could handle growth without breaking. However, expansion also introduced new challenges. Larger inventory purchases required more capital. Additional employees required training. More customers created higher expectations. Growth solved some problems while creating entirely new ones. Yet despite those challenges, the numbers continued moving in the right direction. Revenue climbed. Repeat customers increased. Commercial accounts expanded. The company was becoming more valuable every year. From the outside, the business appeared to be following a straightforward path to success. But behind the scenes, Ethan was discovering realities that almost nobody talks about when discussing consumer product brands. And those realities would ultimately determine whether this opportunity was as attractive as it seemed. As impressive as the growth looked from the outside, Ethan says this is the point where most people completely misunderstand the business. They see revenue numbers and healthy margins, then assume the operation runs on autopilot. The reality is far more complicated. One of the biggest surprises was cash flow. Even profitable companies can experience pressure when inventory must be purchased months before it generates revenue. Large ingredient orders, packaging purchases, and production commitments often require significant capital upfront. That means growth can actually increase financial pressure instead of reducing it. Another challenge is customer acquisition costs. In the early days, word of mouth generated a meaningful percentage of sales. As the company expanded, paid advertising became more important. But advertising platforms became more competitive every year. The cost of reaching potential customers increased, forcing Ethan to constantly improve conversion rates and customer retention. Then there is the issue of competition. New brands enter the market regularly because the opportunity appears attractive. Many launch with professional packaging and aggressive marketing campaigns. Some disappear within a year. Others survive long enough to create additional pressure on pricing and customer attention. Standing out becomes harder as the market becomes more crowded. Supply chain disruptions created another lesson. A delayed shipment of bottles, labels, or ingredients could impact production schedules and customer deliveries. Ethan learned that operational resilience was just as important as marketing. Having backup suppliers and maintaining inventory buffers became essential parts of the business. Perhaps the most important lesson involved expectations. Many people enter consumer products believing they will build a brand quickly and scale rapidly. Ethan discovered that trust takes time. Repeat customers take time. Strong reviews take time. Distribution relationships take time. The business rewarded consistency far more than speed. Looking back, Ethan believes the opportunity is real, but it is not easy money. The winners are usually the operators who stay focused long enough to build systems, relationships, and customer loyalty. That reality removes much of the glamour from the business, but it also reveals why so many competitors struggle. And after years of building, scaling, solving problems, and learning hard lessons, Ethan was finally in a position to answer the question that matters most. If everything disappeared tomorrow and he had to start over from scratch, would he build the same business again? After everything he experienced, Ethan's answer is surprisingly straightforward. Yes, he would build the business again. But he would do it differently. The biggest lesson was that the product itself was never the most valuable asset. The real asset was customer trust. Early on, Ethan spent countless hours thinking about formulas, ingredients, and production methods. Those things mattered, but they were not what ultimately drove growth. What drove growth was creating an experience customers wanted to repeat. If he could go back to day one, he would invest even more aggressively in branding, customer relationships, and retention. He would focus on building a memorable company instead of simply building a product. He also believes many beginners make the mistake of chasing scale too early. They dream about large facilities, huge production runs, and national distribution before proving that customers actually want what they are selling. Ethan recommends the opposite approach. Start small. Validate demand. Learn what customers care about. Then expand gradually as the business earns the right to grow. Looking at the numbers today, the opportunity remains attractive. The demand is recurring. The market is enormous. Customers consistently need the product. Those are powerful advantages. However, the opportunity comes with responsibilities that many people overlook. Success requires inventory management, operational discipline, customer acquisition, quality control, and patience. This is not a business that rewards shortcuts. It rewards consistency. For entrepreneurs searching for a fast path to wealth, there are probably easier stories to sell. But for operators willing to build systems and play a long-term game, Ethan believes the fundamentals remain strong. In many ways, that is what attracted him to the industry in the first place. The business is built around a simple reality. People will continue washing clothes tomorrow, next year, and likely decades from now. And that leads to the core principle Ethan now uses to evaluate every opportunity. Do not look for products that customers buy once. Look for products that customers need repeatedly. Because when a business earns trust and creates recurring demand, every sale becomes more than a transaction. It becomes the beginning of a relationship. And in Ethan's experience, those relationships are what transform an ordinary product into an extraordinary business.